So welcome everybody, and thank you so much for having us all here. And hopefully, hi Colin. I'm gonna hand this over. Can you hand it to Suzanne first? So we are here to follow up on Anne's discussion on DEI and what that means in Europe, and what we have here is a panel of in-house counsel, outside counsel, and the judiciary to talk about their different perspectives of how they view DEI, certainly within Europe, but also in the United States, and what that looks like here. And so I want to build upon what Anne said and let you know that I'm the chair of the PPAC at the USPTO, which is an advisory board to them. And so clearly Director Vidal has made it her priority to link IP, invention, and GDP, gross domestic product. And in a recent study that she had conducted at the USPTO, learned that if we quadrupled the number of inventors in the United States and brought that invention to market, that would increase the national GDP by 4.5%, or in current dollars, about $1 trillion. There is no economy on the planet that wouldn't want to increase their GDP by 4.5%. So this has very real impact at a national level, at a state level, and at a corporate level. So this is not something we're discussing because it's a passion project. This is something that makes real economic sense. So I want to open up here today just to start a little bit about what does DEI mean in Europe? And Suzanne, why don't we start with you?
I think that what is obvious for us in Europe, we always start with gender then. We think about how many women do we have in different contexts, and what measures do we actually take then to increase the women in these contexts. But I also think that we are not also only thinking about women and men, obviously. We're also thinking about LGBTI and minorities around that. And one thing I have started to see, which is increasing, is also openness towards refugees. We have a lot of migration. So I would say it's gender, and then somewhat also coming to the cultural aspect then.
Okay. And Per, what do you think? Is there anything else you want to add to that?
No, I think that's probably the way we think about it. There is the historical thinking about gender aspects, the women versus the men ones. And I agree, we should really start looking at this from a broader context as well. Of course, I think one of the issues might be that it's difficult sometimes to capture some of those data. Because at least in Sweden, it's normally not accepted really, to denote someone, by ethnicity, for example. So getting the data might be a bit of an obstacle, but I think everyone agrees on the fact, that it should be really valuable information if we had it.
Yeah. And Colin, you have quite a little different perspective here. So I don't know, is there any thoughts you'd like to add?
Well, obviously the judiciary is a very different beast, if I could call it that, from others in this context, because on the one hand, in a society, I would think, and we're certainly thinking this, you want your judiciary to reflect the society in which it operates, because that's part of the rule of law, really, is acceptance. On the other hand, it's often said, well, you don't want your surgeon who's performing an operation, you don't want them chosen on the basis of other than their absolute skill. So there is this tension sometimes between a discussion about diversity and discussion about how you select the best people. But we've moved an incredibly long way, at least in this jurisdiction, to realize that that's not an excuse at all, and we have to change, because I think the judiciary in England and Wales is the least gender diverse judiciary in Europe. And there are structural reasons for that, but that needs to change. And you've mentioned, of course, or others have mentioned, it's not just gender. The other one I would mention, which we haven't picked up so far, is neurodiversity. I think that's incredibly important, as becoming more significant as a point that people are realizing. And also social issues. And I mean things like your social background, the ability, and again, in my country, everyone talks about the class system in England. It is very significant, and different social backgrounds don't have equal opportunities in my country. I wish they did, but they just don't. So there's a lot there we could talk about.
Okay. Actually, as a funny aside, in a recent article in the United States, they found that women surgeons outperformed men in every outcome. And so I thought that is kind of funny based on your example. So Nick, can you talk a little bit about, what does DEI mean to the profession here in Europe? How do you guys think about that?
Well, one thing to say to start is I chair a group in Europe that was founded by Mike and some of his colleagues in the US called ADAPT, Advancing Diversity Across Patent Teams. And I'm working with some of Mike's colleagues in the US to try and bring that to Europe. And the thing that we've started working on is understanding what diversity means in Europe to start off with. And the thing that I've learned is I don't think we can categorize Europe as a whole when it comes to understanding what diversity means. Some of my fellow members on the working group from Germany say that diversity is purely about gender. That is the one issue that has to be dealt with in Germany, and people don't discuss anything else. That's what they tell me. A colleague in Denmark has talked about the fact that diversity there is about internationalizing the business and really about the business benefits of having diverse voices, but kind of framed more in terms of an international thing. And then I think in the UK, much of what Colin said is true in that diversity is about looking at gender, race, neurodiversity, and all of the different aspects of how people are different and different things that people can bring to the table to make better decisions. People are looking at every angle, but I think there's kind of a journey, and the United States is probably leading the pack on that journey.
Mike, what do you think? I mean, as you traverse around, and how do you sort of look at these different ways that, different countries define diversity differently?
I think for one, I think everyone stated quite eloquently a lot of the issues that we're seeing. The biggest problem is we're not looking in a room and seeing individuals that represent our broader community. If we can't represent our broader community in the decision-making room, we have an issue with respect to the decisions that come out of that room that impact every single member of our society. Whether that be the particular cars you drive or the social media platforms you embrace on, or in your example, Suzanne, the surgeons, you need to think through, well, how do we become more inclusive? And I think that is exactly right. Gender, racial diversity, neurodiversity, as Colin eloquently stated, as well as underrepresented minority groups who often don't have the opportunity, whether that be due to historical context or socioeconomic societal pressures. All of those are evaluated or should be evaluated. Certainly we're not perfect in the United States. I think we're working diligently to make sure that both our workforce, which will then lead into our innovator force, as well as our practitioner force, which supports that innovator group, is also as diverse as possible. And we'll talk about that today, but it's significant work to be done.
So I think it's fair to say then that there is no one definition of diversity, and that the trick here is to allow each entity who's working in this space to define it as they see it, and then make sure everybody understands your context that you're working in. I think that's probably one of the safe learnings. So I want to take a moment and kind of focus a little bit in on inclusivity, and specifically inclusivity in companies. And so Suzanne, do you want to talk a little bit about what Volvo has been doing and sort of some highlights that you have from that?
Yeah, of course. See if it works with the slide then. Coming up.
Yep. Okay.
So we
We'll
have
make you turn
Colin in
around
the
again.
middle. I think you look great there, Colin. Okay then. We then signed the diversity pledge early 2023. So we're actually quite early off, but I'm still proud to be here and share a bit about what we have done. So what we try to do then is, of course, to link it to context. And we have a goal within the Volvo Group then that by 2030, we should be 30% female employees in all kinds of levels of the organization then. And also, I just wanted to frame it a bit and share then, of course, that the Volvo Group, we focus on commercial vehicles. We have around 100,000 employees worldwide. And not to be confused then with the passenger car business, which is quite normal. So that we divested in 1999.
Yep.
So we have a lot of different truck brands, bus brands, marine segment, and construction equipment. So it's quite a broad and scattered picture around the world then. What we have seen then and what focus we have had so far is that the data we have pulled out shows that we have around 23% women employees. It's not a perfect match to the measurement, but still the starting point is around 23% then. And what we also have seen then is that we have around 10% out of these who are inventors being women. And there we see then an inclusivity gap, which we started to work with. And also we thought it was important not to work in isolation then. So we link our initiative here to other kinds of initiatives we're having. For example, we celebrated the International Women's Day. We have a diversity committee. We collaborate with the Chalmers Women Association as some examples. And one thing I have been also personally striving for a lot is that we have to create awareness around top management throughout the organization. So we have invited ourselves to different top management leadership teams then, and then also participating in different management trainings. So I would say that this first year has been a lot around creating awareness about the topic, making sure that people are interested. And then the next step is to move to an action phase, obviously. And I see in that action phase, one key item is, of course, to actually get hold of our women inventors, which you already have them, which we are very proud about, and let them share their stories, and by that inspire the others. So I think about what you have already and build on that rather than to build on something new.
Right. And how have you found management's response to this?
I think it has been very positive, actually. And I think it's links together with everything that we say that, as you said from the start, I mean, a company wants to be profitable.
Right.
And we are profitable if we are innovative. And innovation comes from diversity. So it all links together. But I think it's the same with spreading the word around IP in general. You have to build the story around it and make sure to actually show the value out of it and not take a topic in isolation. So I'm very happy that I have seen the interest, actually.
Okay. And actually, it just reminds me, I think I should probably backtrack a second. So the Diversity Pledge was launched a little over 3 years ago, and it asked companies to agree to implement a set of best practices and actually track their women inventor rate over a 3-year period, and then has defined reporting. So we'll talk a little bit in a minute about our first year reporting. So you're actually tracking data, and it's to become more transparent, the idea. So did you find when you were talking with your management any concerns about tracking the data, or that they were, because a lot of times what happens with companies is they're afraid their numbers are going to be bad. Actually, they know their numbers are going to be bad. Let me start with that. They know their numbers are going to be bad, and they're afraid to actually publish their numbers. So how did you get over that hurdle?
I would say that we already had that going back then to our overall goal. I mean, in the Volvo Group, we have identified that by 2030, we want to reach the 35%. So I think that the Diversity Pledge clearly links to that. So by that I see that the story was already built somehow. So it was not something separate, I would see.
Okay. Great. So Per, do you want to hand down the clicker? Do you want to talk a little bit about what you've been doing?
Sure. Let's see if this one comes up. Okay, so at Spotify, we signed the pledge in 2022, which I assume is relatively early. And it was a pretty easy sell, to be honest with you, internally. I mean, a lot of what Spotify is standing for in terms of values and so forth is obviously, diversity, inclusivity, and belonging. There's even, a DIB team within Spotify that looks after all these kind of aspects in different types of areas. So what I did, I was basically reaching out to that person who was managing that team and said, I think we should be signing this pledge. It seems to make a lot of sense, from a company perspective and from a society perspective. And that was a very easy sell, to be honest. He was immediately very, very supportive of it. So the first thing we did was, to sign the pledge as such, getting our name onto the pledge, so that people go onto the website, they can see that Spotify is supporting this kind of initiative. And then I said to him, okay, I'll get the data, I said, and then once we have the data, we'll see, what the communication should be looking like. So I gathered the data, and that was an interesting aspect in itself, because we were using the spreadsheet that you provided us with, from I think it's from the USPTO, to basically identify, gender based on inventors' names. So that was my first thing to do, really. And I came back to HR. I said, these are the diversity numbers. These are the inventor numbers. And they said, where did you get that sort of gender data from? And I said, I took it from this spreadsheet. No, we can't use that. So that was this very typical Spotify thing to do. We have to look at them individually, everyone, and make sure that people agree with, because we have several gender types within Spotify, obviously. There were three. There was the female, male, and unknown, and so forth. So that was a little bit of actually exercise of cleaning the data itself. And I wanted to go back as early as possible, because we started to file our first patents in 2014. I wanted to go back all the way to see, if we had some historical data. So that was a little bit of an exercise to clean the data itself. And we ended up, with a kind of, a 20% of the data that we couldn't really identify as what the gender type was. But nevertheless, that's a bit of a side story. And I had actually, when we started this exercise, I was sort of pretty convinced, that we would be so much better than everyone else, including, society in general and compared and so forth. But I was proved wrong, actually. So one of the issues with Spotify measuring the patent, of course, is that we're not a big filer of patents. We file on average maybe 30, 40, 50, even down to 20 early days, a year, So we don't have thousands of data points to measure with. So the numbers have been sort of jumping a little bit up and down over the years, But you can see, that we certainly have a big group. I mean, women are really underrepresented as inventors at Spotify. So for example, if I take the 2022 number, 30% of our staff in R&D was female or women, 30%, but only 13.8%, were inventors on patents. So there is really now a gap there, and that gap has been sort of a little bit different over the years. But it's always been a gap, and it's always been sort of quite significant. And to be honest with you, the trend isn't even positive, So it's not looking good. I think we were better, in 2017 and 18. But as I said, the data points are quite small, so it's hard to say. But it was a bit of an eye-opener for myself, and I think also, for the people I talked to about these numbers. And my manager, he immediately sort of presented these numbers internally and said, this is what it looks like and so forth, and we should really aim to become better. We haven't, as Volvo, really put ourselves a target on where we should be, but I sort of inherently felt, that the target was that there should be no gap. Not like we should have no gap in 1 year, 2 years, but it was the gap itself was sort of, in a way, unacceptable as such. So it's not like there is a target to only have a 10% gap, for example. It was more like there shouldn't be a gap. That's the thing. So what we have done, and what you can see here, on the screen, is that HR loved this, well, they didn't love the fact that we have a gap. They thought, that what should we do about it? And one idea was really trying to see, if we can promote some of those female inventors that we do have, some, have contributed very strongly, to our patent portfolio. So they started creating a theme, on social media, on Instagram, and these pictures, I think, are from LinkedIn. I took screenshots back from LinkedIn, but those went on Instagram, called Women Inventors at Spotify. And you can't actually play them on this screen apparently, but if you actually go on there, you can actually play this, and there is a little sort of animated film about this, who talks about the importance of actually including women as inventors at Spotify. So that was the first thing they did. So the Women Inventors at Spotify, the first thing was announced sort of a couple of months ago, and then they featured the inventors now in stages. So Munia, as you can see on the middle page, she was the first inventor. She's heading up a research team within Spotify, and she's been one of our key inventors all the times. She's always been very, very favorable of working, with our team and so forth, and making sure, we protect our inventions. And the second one was Rachel, which is another person working in a research team. And next month we're actually going to launch another person, And there doesn't seem to be really an end at the moment, and when we will stop this, but we're probably going to produce this for some time. And if I go in and look at social media, the reaction from general audience has been very, very positive. People like this, And I think, also I know that Moon and Rachel have been very proud of, being representative, and ambassadors, for the female inventors at Spotify. They came back and said, I love to be there, so to speak. That was good. But one other aspect, when we started looking at this, and we're starting to looking at, so why were we picking, for example, women as the underrepresented groups? And I think the reason is, as I said at the very beginning, that's one of the categories, obviously, where we have a lot of data on. We do know, the gender of the people in Spotify. We don't know ethnicity and race and so forth, so we can't really do that. But we would love to see also if there are other underrepresented groups. And one idea, that HR asked me about is do we understand, for example, from a hierarchical perspective in the company, no matter, what gender they are, what race they are, but basically where in the organization they sit, do we think, that senior managers, file more patents and innovate more, for example, than junior people, and do we need to reach out to these people? And that is actually something we do have data on. We know, for example, what kind of job description people have. So we could basically do the same kind of analysis to see, if we have people at certain levels who never really file any patents and on behalf of us, and see if because from our perspective, it's really trying to find out, are there any unused resources in the company that we should reach out to, no matter, what gender they are and so forth, trying to find those different types of groups.
Yeah, and I think what's interesting about doing these kinds of things is that you're using patent data, and you're using patent data through the inventorship process to try and understand where you're seeing interesting patterns and it looks like there's a decision issue. So for example, if you have sort of equal representation in your invention disclosures, but when you notice at patent applications that it drops, like perhaps you're only getting 10% of women are their IDS are reaching patent applications, why? Right, and then it encourages you to look through the decision process around that stage gate and understand what's happening. So again, feel free. I think you guys should all. We're going to steal all of this on your stuff. It's pretty good.
Yeah, it's something. I think that's obviously we're pretty good at the company at marketing these kind of things. But it's been really fun to work with them.
Awesome. So Mike, do you want to talk a little bit about your journey at Meta?
Yeah, of course. First, I want to say absolutely kudos to Volvo and kudos to Spotify for the hard work. Because one thing that I've noticed is they both took a look in the mirror and recognized that they would set goals and that they were not where they needed to be. Those are probably the hardest things for a company to do. We at Meta, like you, Per, made the same thing. We're probably the best. And by the way, it's not just that you post on Instagram, that we love that so much. But it's also because at Meta, we were a little arrogant, I would say, in our initial proposal. And we are proud members of the pledge. And when we signed on to do the pledge, the big genesis of this was some data that was produced by the United States Patent and Trademark Office in 2019, showing the gender gap that has so plagued us for so long. 50% of our community are gender diverse, but of course, only 13% of our inventor force is represented by women. That is a problem. But to the arrogant piece, Meta said, of course, that's not us. We'll join the pledge so we can get everybody else on board. So we looked at our data, and that, of course, that is the first step. Having clean data is always difficult, but we looked at our workforce and said, 60% of our workforce are women. And they said, well, that's non-technical. Okay, well, that's fine. It's probably at least 50% in a technical space. And then we got the data after some time with HR and realized only 25% of our technical workforce were women. Okay, well, that's still pretty good, right? 1 in 4 is decent. We can raise those numbers, but 1 in 4 is not bad. We probably have parity, though, in our inventor force. No, it's actually not looking good there either. Well, what do you mean? Is it 1 in 4? It's more like 10%. So we're below what the USPTO is seeing? What happened? What is the problem? I thought we were meta. I thought we were above this. We're a young and spiffy startup. We move fast. Not that fast. So the eye-opening component of this is recognizing that we were not where we needed to be. We thought through our inventor process, we would naturally be inclusive. Why wouldn't we have individuals that were participating in the same, at least numbers, that all engineers at Meta were participating? The problem is, even though we were not making a conscious effort to be discriminatory, our practices were not inclusive. That's the piece that we need to recognize. We need to meet our diverse representation where they are. We need to take into consideration parental issues that people may face. No one wants to spend Saturday mornings when they're at a game for one of their kids working on a patent. Well, some of our male single employees may do that, but a lot of our female inventors don't have the opportunity to do that. And look, it differs. There are a lot of fantastic men who are also at the soccer game. But we have to recognize that this occurs throughout our workforce. If we're housing inventor harvesting sessions after hours, how many people are going to miss out on that opportunity? What groups within our organizations are going to have that? Is this core to our job requirements? If it's not core to our job requirements, then we're missing out on people who would otherwise participate. So while we took the pledge, we also took a long, hard look in the mirror and realized we were not where we needed to be. Now, to your point, Per, the difficult part is convincing HR that you need the data. Well, you should show me the data. No, it's not allowed. But I'm a lawyer. I don't care. So that was the hard part. Really getting good, clean data, to your point, was really difficult. And in order to do that and commit to a diversity pledge, we had to really work with HR in a system that we are very fortunate today to have rolled out internally. So what we did is we created a blinded system run through HR, and I would show it to you, except they won't let us. But ultimately, it allows us to take recursive roll-ups of everyone. So for example, in the tool, I can click Mark Zuckerberg, everyone that rolls up to Mark Zuckerberg, and decide by gender. And by gender, I mean, to your point, Per, we similarly have 7 different distinctions. So we want to be as inclusive as possible by what people have identified. But we also are able to track that by race as well. So we are able to track the number of underrepresented groups, how those individuals identify, because it's not something that you can do facially. You wouldn't recognize, but I am quarter Chinese. I'm 1/8 Korean, and I was born in Jamaica, West Indies. All of these are not self-evident, so we have to go through that HR data, and we're able to now look at that data and recognize who are participating in our inventor community, and realizing that when we signed the pledge and released our data, it was not where we wanted it to be. So we started to implement a lot of proactive measures to be inclusive of everyone within our community in our inventor base. And to your point, Per, we've actually done something similar. We call them diversity spotlights. So every month internally, and I love the external approach, we're working with HR, another thing that you have to do, and marketing to do this externally. So kudos to Spotify for already rolling this out. Meta's looking to do the same thing, but internally we roll out a monthly inventor spotlight highlighting a woman or diverse inventor within our ecosystem, the work that they do, the barriers they face, the issues that they may deal with, and we try to highlight these things in conjunction with each month. For example, women inventors, we highlight them frequently within that month. We highlight members of the LGBTQIA community. We also make sure that during Black History Month, we focus on using an African American or Black inventor within the ecosystem. And we promote this broadly. And what's beneficial, to your point, is that leadership is bought in. they recognize that there's value to this. And when other inventors, no matter the race or diversity, see the innovations that these people are working on, it creates a fervor, it creates a desire, it creates a zeal for everyone to get involved with the patenting system. And at the end of the day, that's going to lead to more innovation, bigger GDP, and overall better patent system.
Agreed. And so it is really interesting. Again, I think we did our first data set recently, and I can give you a little bit of data. Bo and I are still writing the report, and we're going to have more data from ADAPT in that. But we had 30 companies, sorry, report data. 6 of them reported year 1 and year 2. And for those 6 companies that reported those 2 years, they saw a 23% increase in women inventorship rates, which is patent applications, from year 1 to year 2. So what we found is that implementing best practices and focusing on this effort, you can significantly increase your numbers. So we're incredibly proud about that. And kudos to all the companies. I will also say that one of the things we found to be very useful is that we have monthly working group sessions, and really it's for the companies to come together and share what works, but more importantly to share what doesn't work, to save everybody the agony of going down the dark alley that doesn't lead to anywhere. So that, I think, has actually been very helpful.
Yeah, I'm curious to hear from Colin what the judiciary might be able to do in view of all the struggles that he mentioned. And
so, Colin, do you want to chime in with some work that you've been doing recently?
Sure. Well, let me, there's 2 things I could talk about, but just to pick up, if I may, rather than me focusing on what I was going to say, which I will in a minute if I can, but just picking up on Mike's question. There's quite a lot that we're trying to do in the judiciary in my country. I think we could probably get some credit, I suppose, for knowing this has been a problem for a long time, but how on earth you solve it has not been easy. What I wanted to highlight particularly was 2 things that, again, very much picking up on. I'm blaming Mike for this, but anyway, because I really agree that you need to show people. People, if I could put it this way, people from diverse backgrounds need to see that in whatever it's looking at, whether they're looking at a corporation or they're looking at a court system or whatever, they need to see people they recognize. And that's really tough. And we are trying really hard to do that. The other part of what we're doing is we have a mentoring, what we call reverse mentoring, where senior judges are mentored by someone more junior than them who will come from a diverse background to help them understand, what it's like, because they don't know. And that just started this year. It's incredibly good scheme, and I think it will bear real fruit. But the other thing to mention, I just wanted to pick up on, is another thing which I really agree with about things are not self-evident. I'm not going to do it. It's my party trick. But my party trick is to talk in what's not my normal now, but my childhood way of speaking, my childhood accent, because I am, in fact, despite the fact that I'm a very senior English-looking white male, I am, in fact, a state-educated Scottish person with an accent when I came to England, which is treated with some considerable disrespect.
Well, you have to say it now. Now you have to do the accent. Come on.
If you do it, Colin, I'll speak in my native Jamaican tongue.
I was saying.
Come on. Mike's going to match for you. Come on. So he's going to do Jamaican if you do Scottish.
Well, there's if you know the poetry of Robert Burns, the thing that I do is I listen to Burns and I understand the whole thing, which is not like most English people who listen to Robert Burns and they look at me with blank incomprehension, wondering what the hell. And then usually the other trouble with Scottish is you often swear, which I have to avoid doing. But and it's but seriously, it's a problem because we all as we get more senior in this world, certainly in my world, we conform to the senior people we're around. We're all influenced by our peers. And that in itself is an issue. And one of the other things that we've done in the judiciary in my country, just again recently, is started a big conversation where we talk about this now, and it's uncomfortable. And when I go on visits to courts up and down England and Wales, one of my things that I always discuss is inclusion and diversity. And what usually happens is someone who is the slightly dominant, almost certainly male person, judge, will start with sort of jokes, which are sort of trying to laugh it off. And eventually we get through all that and start having a real conversation. And it's not easy, but it's very, very necessary. But look, if I may, can I move on to the other thing we're doing briefly?
Yes.
And tell you about that? This is really about inclusion in a different sense, which is to do with access to justice. What we are trying to do, and this is at least I'm quite excited about in England and Wales, is using technology to improve inclusion, improve access to justice. If I can just explain it very briefly. One of the problems with the most disadvantaged in our society is that their problems, the problems they have to face, are often not in simple legal categories. You know, someone's unwell, they're ill, they have to look after their children, so they can't do their job, so they don't get paid, so they can't pay their rent, so the landlord comes after them and tries to evict them. Now, those problems include housing law, family law, employment law, and in my jurisdiction, and I suspect in most of everyone else's here, those kinds of issues are dealt with in different places in your legal system. It certainly are in ours. Some of them are in our local county courts, maybe our family court, maybe our industrial tribunals. There's a whole set of different places, and the problems cut across the legal categories. Now, we also have a system where we're working on a big project to digitize our entire court system across the board, across civil and family and all these tribunals. And that's created an opportunity which we're trying to exploit. We've created a new rule committee. Now, you're going to sit there, I know, in this audience and think, oh my God, a rule committee, how boring could that be? And it's fair to say that the work of rule committees is not that exciting. But this is quite exciting because it's a rule committee which, at least in my area, has unprecedented remit because it covers the whole spectrum of justice, everything except crime. It covers everything else. And it's created this opportunity to exploit something which we have learned, and no kidding, we have learned from the world of patents. Now, you may have come across, judging by the tech companies on this panel, standard essential patents and FRAND. Now, what on earth has standard essential patents and FRAND got to do with inclusion and access to justice? Well, the answer is this. If you look at the whole SEP FRAND ecosystem, what the world did, was create a brilliant way of having interoperable technology based on these standards. That's how this whole standards system works. And it's allowed, well, you all know this, you can have a Microsoft app on your phone, it's an Apple phone, it talks to a Nokia base station, which talks to a Samsung base station on the other side of the world, which communicates with a Google phone. The tech talks to each other, and it picks up on the point that, was it Matthew, forgive me, Hellerman was saying at the very beginning about connectivity. We have this incredible connectivity, and what we're trying to do is think about how to use that to improve access to justice. And the idea which we're working on through this new rule committee is to use the committee to set a data standard, similar in concept to the sort of standards that you're used to in tech, a data standard which will allow our courts and our advice assistance providers who provide online advice and assistance to everyone who can't afford a lawyer in our society, and the online dispute resolution portals. We have ombudsmen that do various things. I know we got that word, I think, from Sweden anyway, so I'm sure you've got ombudsmen in Sweden, and I know in other countries they do. To have it not build one new computer system, but build a framework just simply from standardization, which would allow all these different entities to communicate with each other, so that when someone presents, an individual who's not legally assisted, presents with their problem, which, as I said, is a diverse problem across different areas of law, they present to a legal advice provider, their data can be passed directly to the court or directly to a dispute resolution portal. And if you go to one portal, the trouble with some of our portals is, again, they can only deal with certain kinds of thing. And with any luck, what we will build, you've heard of the Internet of Things. Well, this is a sort of equivalent for the justice system. And that's what we're working on. I think it's very exciting. I know it's a rule committee. Apologies. But there you
I
are.
think it's great. So I would just say for Qualcomm and Ericsson, please reach out to Colin and give him some advice of your learnings from all that. Yes, exactly. Now, Nick, we haven't forgotten you. Oh, are you going to come on?
All right, so the biggest thing everybody needs to realize about diversity and equity and inclusion is representation from everybody else. So everybody knows from the very world famous Bob Marley, one love, one art.
So, Nick, why don't you talk a little bit about bringing ADAPT to Europe and how that's going?
Yeah. How about to start, Mike, do you want to tell everyone what ADAPT is and what it's doing in the US? Because then that'll help me probably explain what we're doing in Europe.
Great context. I appreciate the segue. So ADAPT, which so many people have eloquently used that word in the past, is advancing diversity across patent teams. It was created a little over a year ago by myself and 6 other co-founders from 6 different tech companies: Microsoft, Google, Amazon, the Walt Disney Company, Meta, of course, as well as Cruise. They're a self-driving company based out in the Bay Area. And these 7 individuals from those 6 companies came together to combine the efforts that we were all doing in diversity, equity, and inclusion into a platform that is based on 3 basic principles. The first of which is sharing of information. So recognizing that not every company is as situated as a Meta or a Google, we wanted to share out, open source, if you will, the information that we use to promote diversity, equity, and inclusion. So on the adapt.legal website, you can go and you can find more than 24 different diversity, equity, and inclusion programs that you are free to utilize. Download, contact information, how-to guides, you name it, it's there. And we're adding new programs, new platforms daily. The reason why is because whether you have $1, 1 hour, or 100 hours, everyone should be able to participate in a diversity, equity, and inclusion program that makes the most sense. The Diversity Pledge is highlighted as one of the programs. So was other organizational programs like ours at Meta, how we track our outside counsel diversity. All of that is free for anyone to utilize from the platform. The second core value to the ADAPT platform is mentorship. Recognizing that each and every one of us in this room have gotten here simply from the help of others, and the mentoring program that has been identified by the panel is something that's extremely important. We provide college-level students with an interest in intellectual property with no less than 6 mentors of their own, all from diverse industries, from law firms, from in-house, and globally, so that they have a network of individuals that they can build upon, ask questions of, and utilize for their growth in this space. And we select from historically Black colleges and universities, we select from underrepresented groups, and we prioritize women and other underrepresented groups within the profession. And the third and lastly, not least focus for ADAPT is data. Taking a page from Suzanne and the Diversity Pledge, we realize that if we do not understand the data, we cannot move the needle. And we've all heard the statistics. They're terrible. For example, you may have heard the old adage, if you have not, that there are more Mikes in the United States Patent Bar than there are racially diverse women. And while I love my name, that's a terrible statistic. So we have to make sure that we change that number, and therefore the third pillar, data, is very important to us at ADAPT as well. Well, proud to say that in a little over a year, with the support of members of this panel, Suzanne and the Diversity Pledge, Bo, and other organizations, we've gone from 6 founding companies to over 70 law firms, corporations, and intellectual property partners, including Nigel, who I'm sitting here looking at now, who are committed and have signed on to ADAPT as members in the last year. Over 70 organizations globally. And with that, Nick, who saw the initiative, the value, and decided to become a partner as well, please let us know.
Absolutely, and as Mike said, it's all about sharing. You're not going to compete with your competitors on diversity. Diversity is something that can be shared, and so we can all benefit from it. And therefore, we're trying to see how we can learn from the fantastic things that ADAPT's doing in the US and share that within Europe and allow the European and US communities to start interacting with one another and sharing things with one another. The thing we've noticed, though, is the US and Europe are different. There are lots of fundamental differences. In general, Europe has free education systems or heavily subsidized education systems, which is very different to many aspects of the US. In Europe, the approach to parental leave is very different to the US. And this impacts what Europe needs when it comes to assistance with diversity and improving diversity. I think Europe also has more embedded cultural issues to overcome. Like, being frank, Europe essentially invented and came up with the white man that takes over the world. And we've kind of created a massive problem by this historical embedded nature of the kind of white man being dominant. And I think there's more for us to unpick to some extent than a newer nation like the United States. So there are differences. And so what we're doing in the working group ADAPT Europe at the moment is trying to work out what Europe needs, because we don't want to just carbon copy what's going on in the US and bring it here, because I don't think it's necessarily going to work. So we have a survey that's about to go out to collect information on what's going on in different European countries, because this is another big difference with Europe, is it is a collection of lots of individual countries that have their own IP groups within each country, and there's lots of different things going on, but actually no one's joining those dots as to what's going on in Sweden, what's going on in France, what's going on in the UK, and how can we all learn from one another. So we're launching a survey to try and collect that information so we can work out what Europe needs, what's already going on that's brilliant that we could share amongst us, and then how we can link that to what's going on in the US so that we can have more of a global community that's dealing with diversity and improving diversity. So the one thing I would like to say is, if anyone wants to join ADAPT and get involved in our European working group and help shape what we're doing, then please get in touch, because we'd love more people to be engaging with it in Europe. Because of the 70 companies you mentioned, there's actually a relatively small European contingent at the moment, so we'd love to increase the number of European companies and law firms that want to be involved.
And not at the cost of sounding like a salesperson, but there's no cost to join now.
Free Ginsu knives.
That's exactly right. They slice, they dice, they make julienne fries. But we do have members in the EU. We're looking to grow that group. We have members in India, Australia recently joined. So we are growing, but each jurisdiction is different. And it's very important that we come together and focus on our respective jurisdictions to make the learnings there better. For example, we require specific practices to become a member of the patent bar, as well as to become a patent attorney, including requiring law school for a patent attorney. That's not the case everywhere. And so sourcing people to join, to intern, to then train, to become practitioners in the space, vary by jurisdiction, and we need your help to do it. Adapt.legal is the webpage. You can feel free to email info@adapt.legal. I am one of the many people who answer those emails. So please reach out if there's any questions, and we're more than happy to walk you through how the process looks for your respective company.
So can we open up to questions here? Carla, I hate to do this to you, but you're going to have to run again. Roberta? It's not Carla today.
Hi. Can I
Yeah.
can I like be there for
You
2
can.
minutes?
Come on.
Please. My name is Roberta Höglund. I am the head of IP in Elkem. Elkem is a company producing silicon. And I know nobody knows us, but if you have a mobile phone that is an Apple, you have 3 grams of silicon produced in Norway. Coming back to my point, Michael, you mentioned mentorship as a very efficient tool to increase diversity. I agree with it. Even more important is sponsorship. Yes. Because there is research that shows that sponsorship is most effective when it's informal. Normally, members of the underrepresented group don't get it. But I was very, very lucky to be sponsored by somebody here, Bowman. "20 years ago, it was my first SIP forum. I was a student. I was a version of Carla running around, helping. Oh, I'm getting so teary. This is my 8th or 9th year. I lost the count that I have been recognized in the Intellectual Asset magazine, 300 leading IP strategies. I don't remember anymore. Mm-hmm. But I know that I would not be here today without the sponsorship of this man, because we were somehow similar. He was American, I was Mexican. We were in Sweden, we were the foreigners. Nobody believed in me. He did. And I'm so thankful for you. So, so thankful, and you know that. So, for all of you that are members of the dominant group, help somebody from an underrepresented group. What do I mean? Women, Black, Latinos, Asians. Help somebody. You have the power. The system is broken. There is a web of challenges, systemic challenges, organizations in a system. What do I mean by challenges? Implicit bias, leadership prototypes, organizational structures, organizational processes, access to capital, overt hostility. We need to confront the organization. We need to recognize we have a problem. And for you that you said at Meta, we have a lot of women, but still, we don't have enough inventors. Why? Because the system is broken. We need to fix it. Until we recognize that, all the tools are not going to work. And data, you need to have access to data. Without data, you cannot measure anything. It's a fight, but you really need to get the data. With that, thank you very much.
Thank you. So, I mean, I think Roberta makes a really good point here while we're going to go to the next question, which is, this is personal, right? While we're talking about data, while we're talking about organizational behavior, there are people, and this is affecting people, and it's about making real change. Yes?
Yes, so I think you're doing a great job with what you are doing. Look, and you need to group people in order to make visible how the world is. But actually, I think there's also probably a group of white men that need help as well. And they are completely being ignored here. And I think it's a shame. So in a way, I see it, you said it just now, it's individuals, that some individuals, they need maybe some support to go out there and show what they can do. And I think it doesn't matter which sex you identify with or which minority you belong to, but it's more complicated to support that way. But the way you said it, that if you are a strong person and you have success, if you go out and help somebody that you can see need that help, I think that's a very good recommendation, because then it's not about which group you belong to, and it's not, it's more informal, and I think that's a very, very great thing to promote. But actually, I just wanted to hear if anybody is looking at the poor white men that are being excluded, really.
Sure. Could you want to give your name too, so we know who you are?
Oh, my name is Lise. I'm in Topsø, patent department.
Okay, so sure. So I think one of the most important things to note is when we collected all this data and we saw that there were, in fact, changes for women, almost every single company who went out and started talking about inventorship and trying to work with underrepresented groups, every single one of them found that inventorship overall increased. Because as you're going out and you're talking about this, you're reaching more than the demographic you're looking at. So if you were looking at women, more men started inventing. You actually end up reaching all of these other people who realize they may not have been participating in this process as they could have or should have. So, I mean, if there's any one of you that want to chime in with any of that, feel free.
No, but I agree. I mean, it's part of an overall perspective. I mean, by doing this initiative, we are opening eyes for many, and by that we foster innovation in total, I would say. So I agree that it's like a circle of influence, I would say.
Did you add, Nick?
I think there is an extra important thing to say here. I think it's very true to ensure that all kind of underrepresented groups and people that are struggling to come forward with innovations are recognised. But I've come to recognise as a straight white man that I have a lot of privileges, and I like to think I'm absolutely brilliant. I became a partner in a law firm because I'm brilliant. But actually, I've had so much help to get there. I've had so much less friction, and I think it's absolutely critical that white men that have had an easier ride and are likely to be in leadership positions within organizations are using those privileges and the power and the influence that they have to make a difference, because we really can. And I don't think we're doing enough. I find that too often panels like this are just diverse people that fall into the diverse categories talking about it. And I think it's really important, lots of the things that Colin have been saying, that we're here representing people and making change happen.
Colin, did you have any comments?
Well, just to say, first of all, I mean, I really agree with Nick and also with the lady, forgive me, Lisa. I thought that was a really important point. But look, this is about power. And we all need to make sure that everybody with the power understands what's going on, and they don't. Let's be real, they don't all, and not everybody agrees with this. They may say the right thing because they know they need to say it, but we need to have these conversations, and we need to show. And I think Nick's absolutely right. Powerful white men, and I'll put my hand up, I suppose I'm a powerful white man. We need to talk about this in a way which makes it clear that we don't accept it.
Right.
And we want to do something about it.
And I think it's important to note that all of you in the room have power. Every single one of you. And if you can decide to help someone, to change something in your organization, to initiate a program, to look at the data, you individually can make a massive difference.
I want to just add one more great word, and I thank you for adding sponsorship. The other word is allyship. Allyship is support from someone who is not a member of that particular group. I do think we need to be very cognizant of the socioeconomic impact and involvement of poor individuals, whether they be Caucasian or otherwise, male or female. Colin articulated that. He's absolutely correct. And I would not be here but for the support of Caucasian men who have recognized that they were allies to me as sponsors and mentors. So to Suzanne's point, each and every one of us in this room, now that we have risen to a particular level of power, I was a partner at a law firm as well, thanks to support of others. I'm not on here because I'm diverse. I'm on here because I'm exceptional. I'm going to stand up and say that. Everyone else is here, but no one else, you all didn't also need to do the DEI journey, but you are. And that's because we're allies and can step into that power and exhibit it for those who can't.
Well, I'd like you guys to join me in thanking our panelists for sharing all their thoughts.